Kia ora koutou. I'd like to have a look at the name of God, Ancient of Days now. And Ancient of Days, unlike some of our other names of God that we've had a look at, doesn't actually appear that many times in the Bible. And the times that it does appear, it's in the book of Daniel. And so some of the references that we see in the book of Daniel to Ancient of Days, they're actually all in the one chapter. So chapter 7. So chapter 7 of Daniel, if you have a look at verse 9, verse 13, and verse 22, those are the times that this name of God is mentioned. So this is the Ancient of Days. And really, when Daniel's talking about the Ancient of Days, he is talking about God, he's talking about the Lord, he's talking about the Master of all, he's talking about the Father of Christ himself. And so he's talking about God the Father when he's referencing the Ancient of Days. Um, and as I mentioned, this is only in Daniel that the Ancient of Days words appeal, but um, there's also in those verses in Daniel, there's a really a thought that the Ancient of Days has all authority, and he gives that authority to Jesus. And you see that in Daniel verse 13, Daniel 7, verse 13. And it's sort of predicting the coming of Jesus, and you see the Ancient of Days giving Jesus the authority, the glory, sovereign power over all nations and peoples of every language, and that there will be a kingdom that is coming, that's everlasting, and that it will never be destroyed. There's some of that imagery in that book of Daniel, in that chapter that we're looking at, in the verses relating to Jesus and God, God the Father as Ancient of Days. I'm also wondering with the name of God of Ancient of Days, and Daniel, he really emphasizes that the Ancient of Days is more beautiful and spectacular than any king that you might have seen um, in the world, and that's quite special in thinking about that, because he's comparing it to the kings of the days. So we're talking about the Persian um, kings who were quite ostentatious, who basically ruled the world, as was known in the Bible. Um, and so, they were up there as to kings who were glorious and powerful, and um, ruled over a nation or nations. And so I think in Daniel, with him doing a comparison to something that the people at the time with that context would have understood, he's also uh, saying that the Ancient of Days is more than that. So he brings God up, and he places God above the Persian kings of the time, in a place that's higher than those kings. And, there is something quite spectacular in that as well, in placing God higher than any other really powerful king that they'd ever seen at the time on earth. But when I stop and consider these words around who God is, the name of God, Ancient of Days, I go, actually, there's some really, I guess, some insurance in that name of Ancient of Days, because to me, it means that there's a lot of wisdom in the words Ancient of Days, that the person that's associated with them has been around for a long time. They've gained wisdom over that time, although God obviously has all the wisdom in the world. But in my human mind, I'm thinking somebody who's ancient is most likely going to be wise as well. And that might be, in my thinking, that's a gaining of wisdom as time progresses. But if we take Ancient of Days and we apply it to God as a name, He is actually all knowing. He has all wisdom. He is eternally wise, and He has been in existence forever. And so that does actually make Him older than time. Have you ever thought about that about God? That He is older than time because He's the person that actually made time. So therefore, He needs to be older than time. And you're like, there is a hugeness of that thought that is quite hard in my head to grasp, that God is beyond time and that He looks at time differently to us, but He created time as well. And He knows the days of time that He has created. And that is just this awesome there's an awesomeness about this that almost gives God like a steadfastness, because He was there before time and He is in time and He created time. And while the name Ancient of Days for the Lord is mentioned only a very few times in the Bible, in that book of Daniel, I'm like, there's something about it that just makes me go, there's a reassurance that that is who God is, that He is beyond time. He was here before time. He is going to exist after time ceases to exist. So I challenge you, I encourage you to have a little bit of a look and explore in Daniel, and explore what the ancient God's name as the Ancient of Days means to you. And I hope it brings a real richness to how you think about God, with the wording of Ancient of Days for a name of God.